And with no further delays, we go into the next speaker. So we have Fernando. Fernando, well, what can I say about Fernando? So he's a master gamer of board games. So he's like every time he has time, he's doing this board games thing. He's also a coffee lover. Sometimes in the office, he has these machines and things. He's like building a coffee machine. I don't know what the hell he's doing because we have an espresso machine, but he takes his own coffee things. So he has two cats, Riscas and Pastel. I have no idea what this means. These last days, Fernando is also our DJ, our director, and our producer of this whole event. He says that as a software developer, never created big incidents. But the truth is that this event is just started. So let's cross our fingers and hope that everything goes well. So he's going to talk about React Concurrent. I have no idea what this means. Let's wait a moment and you will join us just right after this. See you guys.
Hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. Sorry for all the things that I need to do. It's a crazy adventure today. I hope you can hear me well. I think you can hear me well. I'm Fernando. Pedro already presented. I really a lover of board games. I can show you here that I have something to read. It's a rule book for board games that I have in here to read a long time ago, and I didn't have time. But yes, it's one of my favorite hobbies. I'm married with a Mindera. I have two cats, and yes, I'm a big crazy do-it-yourself person. I like to make things that usually common people say this is too much. Like I try to roast my coffee, I try to make my own yeast, I make beer, I make meat. Usually people tell me that it's crazy, and I know it is, but it's the way I like things. I like things that take time to develop and take time to appear. So I'm a front-end developer in Mindera. I work on Mindera since 2016. I'm gonna be 4 years in September. I really want to share with you guys that it's really a pleasure to be part of this family. I know this is a little bit cliche since we are making virtual conf in this company, and talking things like this about the company is always cliche, but I really mean it. I don't know if it's this quarantine, like more than 1 month in home, but I really miss the moments that we got together and we shot, we laughed, we worked together, and we built amazing things. So I want to give a really huge hug to all the minders that can be seeing this. I want to send a big hug to everything that is suffering with this, no matter if it's health, if it's economic, or sanity, because it's mess for everyone, for sure. So I'm going to talk about concurrent Hookilization, and I don't know, this is not working. Let me check why. This is normal in live things. Okay, now it's working. So what I'm gonna talk, React Concurrent Mode is something that is being created, is on experiment mode. So this is something that everyone can read on this on React Docs website, and I'm gonna talk a little bit. It's not really deep, but it's a brief explanation about this concurrent mode. I'm gonna start by talking about ways of fetching, the ways we fetch right now, and then we will start seeing the concurrent mode API. That is a new API. So Suspense. I think if you know about React, some things of this will be normal. If you already saw the documentations for concurrent mode, this is not new for sure. But let's try to make this as a brief explanation of the new API. So everyone knows about what is the suspense lazy. If you work with React, for sure, you already saw that some versions ago React sent suspense and the React lazy. So in theory, and this is, I need to refresh sometimes. I didn't have too much time to polish this, but yeah, let's continue. If you see, we have a parent and we have a child, and the child is lazy load. So it's normal. We have the parent is here, and then we return a lazy component. This is really common these days for client side, because this doesn't work in server side. But yeah, for client side is really common. If you work or if you saw any code that makes split code splitting with React is something related to this. First of all, let's make sure that this is an experimental mode. This is really early. They say on their documentation that you should not use this in production. This should be only used by if you want to check how it's gonna be, or if you want to try it, or if you want to try to test it and to see if there is any bugs and these type of things. So the API can change drastically. This is really experimental. If they need to change it, they will change it without no warnings. So we should not use this in production. So React Lazy and Suspense Concurrent Mode doesn't work in server-side rendering. So this could be a really problem. We already have the first problem that everything can change, so you should not use this in production for sure. But if you are using any server-side rendering, this is not ready yet for server-side rendering. And of course, on this stage should be a lot of bugs. I put here a Twitter from Dan Abramov from 2 years ago, and he's talking about the suspense, how we think that suspense will be happening, or his vision, and I hope this will make sense a little bit more at the end of this talk. So what is it's told here is that in the future the idea is to have streaming the things that are already ready, and then stream the rest for the content that is inside but is not ready. So this is the ways of usually we do fetch. One of them is fetch on render. This is really common, and if you check what we are making is like we are rendering the parent and then we are rendering the child. If you see, you cannot see here, but there is a difference. The parent is really more quick and the child is a little bit slower. So what we are making here, if you check, is the show response is a component that is equal for for both components, sorry. But because the child is using the same thing, if you see, it's only showing a text. But if you see what we do, we make a thing to get a state to make the data, a state to the loading. We render, the first render is a loading state because we start with a render true, and then after the first render we use effect or Debounced, is the same thing in this case, to make a request. We fetch the data, we send the data to the state, and we change the loading to the false because it's not loading anymore. And then this will make like this. The another way that is common to make is like fetching all. Fetch, then render. This name is a little bit weird because we are rendering first, and we will see that we always render first. But the idea is that we will fetch all the data that we need, parent and child, and then we will show the information at the end. So it's almost the same case. We have the same thing. We have a loading that is not a loading for each one, but it's a loading for all all the assets that we need, or all the requests that we need. So if you see, we're using a promise all, so we are making 2 requests. When these requests are finished, we are saving the data, and we will put the loading to false. So if you see what happens, and you see the previous example, the parent is quick and the loading child is slower, right? And here we can see that in this case we are losing the time to see the parent because the child take more time than the parent. So when we click, when you make the reload, we will see that we will fetch all, wait for all to wait, doesn't matter if one is fast or not, we will wait and we will return everything at the end. Then we have this new or this fetching way that is really starting on this concurrent mount idea. Of course, we can already make this, but we'll get there for sure. Is fetching as soon as possible and then showing when the data arrives. So if you check here, when we do this, we're gonna receive the child 1 and child 2 and child 3 will wait, and then we'll receive child 2 and child 3. So they are in order slower than the previous one. So the first one is really quick and the other ones are slower. So there is a huge difference between this code and the other code, and you will see right here. So what we are making is we are using Suspense. Is not new because we already use for components with lazy, right? But we are using this and we are using child 1. You are using this and we are using child 2, child 3. And if you see each child that is inside 1, 2, 3, if you see, has something that is resource get child read. It's weird. It seems that the resource is already being fetched, and it is, because when the file is parsed, this is running, is get the resources. This is what is making the render is not rendered yet. The parent the parent object is not yet there, but the fetch is already doing here. I will not show you here what is this get resources, but we will see in future slides what it is. But if you check, what we are making is we make the resource, we make everything, we render the parent, and then each child will use the resource here. So it's how this is working. Okay, I have here maybe a easy example using not childs, but like a more real example. We have a profile. Imagine the profile is really quick to get, and message and friends is the same idea, get more time. If you think on the previous slides that I showed you, we never told, or you never told React to wait. What we have done is making React to render a state is a not ready prepared state, right? But then we fetch the information, and when it come back, we change the state for I have data, show the data. But if you imagine for React, that doesn't mean anything. For React, he has two states. One is the first render, and the second one, he doesn't know if it needs to fetch data or not. So it's here that this concurrent mode is appearing. So if you see, I'm not saying, oh, I don't have data. I need to set a state to put the data there, a loading. No, what I'm doing is I'm rendering the profile, and the profile is using a data. We will see next slides what this means. If you see here, what I'm doing is I have a data layer that is requesting the information. Okay, and then I'm using that information to pass to everyone. If you see profile info, message info, friends info. I hope this is difficult to make this because we don't know if the sound is okay and if you are getting everything, or I'm going too slow or too fast. But let's wrap up everything that we told. So we managed to talk about 3 ways of fetching. The first one is we will render, know what to fetch and fetch. Then we saw the second one, that was we will fetch everything. We will start with a state that is really the simplest one is I don't have any data. At the end we will have the state that say I have all the data, and then we render that data. And now we have a new thing that is weird because we are not fetching and setting data, but everything is working. Like the loading is there, when the data came, the render is there. So now is the second part of this talk that I will talk about how this works. Okay. Let's first talk about suspense. Sorry. And this is the secret of everything that is happening. When we make a fetch, we don't tell React that the fetch is working. I already told that. But with suspense, it's a little bit different. This is the same example that I show you, but you know that we are showing each information how this works. So suspense doesn't work with normal promises, and this is really true. So that is the reason why React Lazy exists, and why you cannot make a fetch and put on a suspense, a normal fetch, and everything works. Not because there is a wrapper that is inside. I will show you that wrapper. If you see here how React is making these things, and we already know some things of this, like the error boundary, is usually if there is a promise that is thrown, the suspense will catch. So if there is a suspense wrapping any component that throws a promise, is because something is not ready. Is this the way that we will talk React? That I'm not ready to render, I'm missing something. Doesn't matter what it is, but I'm missing something. Okay? If we throw something that is not a promise, but we throw an object, a string, doesn't matter, what React will think it is an error. So if you see here, I made a mistake, is because we are throwing an error. So if we throw an error, suspense will not take it, but if we have an error boundary wrapping that component, the error boundary will catch that. We already know about this because error boundary is not new. So if you not throw anything, it's because we can continue. I can show you here the code that is doing more or less all the examples with small changes between slides, but it's more or less this. So we have the childs that have sorry, we have the promise. The wrapper is something that startup pending. It's like the status of this asynchronous call. We don't know what it is. If it's a component, if it's a fetch, doesn't matter. And then we start the promise that we received. So we start the promise, and if the promise resolved, we put success on the type. And if the promise for some reason catch an error, we put the results here and put the status to error. So when you call read, and this is more or less the secret of the suspense, is when you put read, what is going to happen? And you can see here that we are doing resource, get child info number 1, that is the info for this child, and then we put the read. What is happening? If the status is pending, is because this promise didn't resolve. This will throw a suspender. What is a suspender? Is the promise. So if the promise is thrown, suspense will know that, okay, if you throw a promise, is because it's not ready. I will show my loading state. Okay. If I catch an error, and is this part, is because our promise, doesn't matter what it is, thrown an error. So we need to throw that error up. So if to the error boundary to catch it. It's really important to have the error boundary catching this, because suspense will not catch the error for you. You need a way to resolve to make an action when you have an error. This is important. So suspense only will take this, not this. Okay? And then we have the status. If the status is success, it's because the promise worked. So we receive everything, so we will return this result. In theory, what will happen is, if this gets here and throw a promise, the promise will go up until this suspense, and this will be shown. If it's an error, we need to continue up. In this case, this child is returning an error, so in this case, this child is returning first the suspense, is throwing a promise, sorry, so the suspense will fall, but then at the end we'll catch an error, so this error boundary will show. Okay. And then yes, if the result is okay, he'll continue. So if this was live, I will ask you how do you think this will work in terms of console logs? So we have a bunch of console logs here. So we have child inside child 2, inside child 3. So these consoles make the render. When the child 1 render, will go the console 1, child 2, console 2. It's more or less easy to understand the order that is working. I think in this case I have a thing to show them the fetch tool. Let me check if I have in this example. I don't have. Maybe I have in another example. Let me put previews, because in this example I can show you what I mean. So if you see, we are doing, if we do this, we'll see the data layer, and we remember that we have the data layer here. Then we have fetching, fetching, fetching. And why? Because the resource, what is gonna make is like fetching, fetching, and fetching. It's correct. We are fetching 3 requests, but we are not waiting for them to finish. We are already continuing the render process. And then if you see, we have inside profile 1, inside profile, inside message, inside friends. Okay, this makes sense. This render will work, this render will work, and this render will work. After that, we'll have a profile, message, and friends again. And why? So these throw the promise. So usually in promise, we continue, or if you make a sync await, imagine you continue on the place that you stopped, right? And it's true. We will continue in the place that we stopped, that this is the suspense. So what is happening is, after this resolve, this first fetch resolve, so in these first consoles, the fetch of profile is not yet done, and here is already done. And it'll run everything that is the child of this suspense. That is the reason why React, when hooks came out, they told that the hooks should be like each declarative, they should always return the same thing on the first render. And why? Because the first render that run here was discarded. Since you threw the promise, you'll render again everything the first stage, and we'll continue with that first render. So that is the reason why profile appear here. And if you see, profile never appears yet more, but you have message friends is because of this, right? And then we have message and friends. And why? The same thing. This continue when this is rendering. This will have information, but this is throw a promise, but is this suspense that is taking. So he'll only discard this render, wait for that to happen, and then render again. And that is the reason why you see message and friends. I hope this is not very confused. Maybe I'm not explaining really well. So let's continue. So first of all, I want to show, because on my previous slide I had 2 things that I didn't explain. That is the blocking mode and the concurrent mode. So this is inside of the API. And I thought that the best way of explaining is showing you the documentation, because they have a really good example here. So legacy mode is when you use React DOM render something. So this is the legacy mode. What they will say that they will, after concurrent mode is delivered, we will have 2 modes. You will have the React DOM blocking mode and the concurrent mode. It's like the create root, I think, is something here. Then we can is create blocking root and create root. And the difference between them is they will, first of all, the legacy will be for sure always making things that are legacy, like string refs, the legacy context. After you change to block mode, is the same mode of the render, but will deprecate everything that is already deprecated, and some things were already working, like the suspense list, these type of things will work. And then the concurrent mode is where all the features that maybe some of them we will explain. Some of them you can see that there is no links for that. I really interested on this progressive iteration and other type of things. So for using this, you need to use the concurrent mode. And the concurrent mode is the create root instead of the render. Okay? Let's continue. So, okay, until now, what we figure out is we need to tell React that we are fetching. This is the main thing that we are making here. Is saying, I'm not ready. I need information that I don't have right now to render. So wait for me, and when I'm ready, call me again. It's more or less this. So Then we have components that help us, or APIs that help us to making these working together. If you see, there is a suspense list, and this is good when you have more than one suspense in the same page. So I think you know the loading of that or something, that you have each component loading because everything is on a state that needs to load. This is preventing that. So the default one is the normal one. We sorry, let me remove this. We put all the information loading, all the loadings appears. If you see this is a little bit different. So we are only showing the profile loading, then we will show the message loading, and then the friends loading. So what this is doing is showing the first loading that is waiting. So everything that is not after that will not be shown, and at the end we will have more or less the idea of fetching all and then showing. That is, I didn't receive friends yet, and now I receive friends with everything. We already received this, but we didn't show because we only showing the last suspense, and we'll continue up. Okay, showing the code for this is more or less this. All the things that we have in a suspense will be shown like this. If we have a suspense list with with these properties, the suspense will be the first one, then the second one, and the third, and this is the order backwards. So, okay. So I have an example here, only to show you that a lot of these APIs are good to tell React that we are not ready, but to build user interface is a little bit difficult, or good user interfaces, because we are telling React that something is not ready, but then we only showing loadings replying to that. So of course there is another things to use, and I will show you here input that I've done. So the API is really quick because this is them data. I can write whatever I want. This will appear always the same things. But if you check what is happening, the first is a loading, okay. Then when I type, this is like my design skills working. So I have a grade if I'm loading, and the loading itself is like this. So what I'm making is like a search input. I need to search something I need to be really quick. Usually we have different ways of doing this, okay? When we fetch data, we show a loading, but again, if we fetch data and show the loading, we are not saying React that we are fetching anything. We are making all this logic, and React is not aware that we are fetching. So what we need to do is to create suspense and everything to work. So this makes sense, but if I use Debounce, it's not so good in terms of user interface, right? I'm waiting milliseconds, I want to see data, but the application doesn't know it needs. So for sure we are reducing the number of fetch that we are making, but sometimes we don't want to reduce anything. We want to make calls to be with a fluid API. So I think the bouncing is not something that we should use. I'm going to show a little bit the code that I have here, and sorry if the transitions are weird, but it's something that I want to try. It's not these slides, it's to do transition 1. It's not transition 2. I lied. So what we have here, it's a normal case of, okay, we have a debounce. I'm using Lodash for this, and sorry if the code is not perfect, but I didn't have time to polish this. But I have a debounce, that what I'm making is, with the input change, I'm setting the value, and I'm debouncing the results, right? I'm showing the results at the end. You can see here the results. But what I'm doing when I change the input, I go to here, I set the state, because I want the input to update, like I don't want to wait for the request, and then I make a debounce for the fetch. So this is what we have here, but I don't think this is a good interface. So what we can make here is maybe no debounce, but this is weird too. So first of all, and I think if you already make forms and this type of things, you will know that if we fetch at the same time that we are updating an input, something will not work. My API is really cool, so it's really performative, so it's very quick, but for sure you already notice input lag. You are trying to input things, but the browser is trying to make everything at the same time. Here we don't have that problem, but we have another problem. So we are using fetching. We are telling React that we are fetching, and React is saying, okay, I will show the loading. Every time that you type something, I will show a loading. Nothing really good here, too. So I will not show you the code for this because it's only removing the debounce, but I'll show you the code for this. And this is more or less the example that I show in the first place. So I'm typing, I'm making, but I'm showing you the version that I had previous. So when you see the values are not changing, I'm sending a status that is a pending status, and everything is updating after the result came. So to show this, and sorry, let me make this change again. If you can see, and this is transition 4, it is the final, this is done only using this, use transition. And this is the action that we have, or the API that we have, to make React knowing that is missing something, but for user interface is not really important. So what I have here is we will set the value, the same thing of the debounce, and we start the transition. This transition is a hook that we will say what is the maximum number of time that will wait until showing the loading again, because this is a suspense, right? We are inside of a suspense no matter what. So what we have here is like in 5 minutes, if my promise doesn't reply, I want to show this here. I want to show the real suspense that is showing the loading. But if you see, there is a pending here. Okay, and what it is, when we do the start transition, that is one of the returns of the hook of transitions, the use transition, what is like making this running on the less priority. So it's less priority that this set state. And what is going to happen is we'll go out of the suspense tree. Like this suspense will not know that this is loading. What is going to happen is this pending that will change if it's loading or not. So if you see here, when we make the results, we make the pending, and we go here, and we see the suspend is not triggered, only the first time, and then we are changing to something that is more gray, and the results are the same, are the previous. And why? Because this didn't trigger anything. The results are the previous results. So this is like a way of using a deferred value. I will go to the deferred value for sure in the next slide, but this is more or less the same thing. I will continue to use the previous thing that I have, make these transactions outside of my current flow, and when it finished, come back to me. It's more or less this. So I don't know, I didn't saw the time. I'm finishing here, so let's continue. Okay, let's go. I think this is more or less explainable here. Let's continue, and sorry to change everything. Let's continue to the useDeferredValue. So useDeferredValue is the last topic that I will cover in this talk, and is something that for React doesn't make too much sense, but it makes at the end, and be with me because at the end will make sense. So usually React is very known by the very deterministic. So I have a state, if I have that value, I will show this tree. Doesn't matter. So in this case, what I'm doing is I have a profiles, and this example is really copied from the React website. This was Abramov that made. So I thought was the best example to give you. And the idea is we have something that is really fast and something that is less fast. And when we change, we want to show the values of that profile with message. Doesn't matter, or posts in this case. But if you see, this is a little bit jumping. Again, we want to have a way to say to React that our data is not ready. We need the data, but we don't want to have these loadings everywhere, right? So that is the reason why useDeferredValue appears. I'm going to change again to my code to show you how we made this in the first place. And then I will show how to use the deferral, and you'll see the difference. So this is a normal component. We have here, we are getting some data. We didn't render yet, and this is the reason why when you see the page is already with some information, because the render didn't appear and we are already fetching. Okay? Then we are putting that fetch here, and of course, because we want this to be always equal. If these continue to render again, we will put the same object here. And then we click to fetch the new value. The fetch new value is always jumping forward, doesn't matter. And then we have the profile with that resources. So the profile page is something that has a suspense and a suspense of the message. So this profile timeline is something that will appear slowly than this one. Sorry. So in this case, what is going to happen? We want to trigger this suspense and then waiting for this suspense to show this. And this is what is happening. If you see, and this is normal, it's only rendering. If you see, again, we'll throw a promise up, this suspense will take, we'll promise up, this suspense will work. So if you check, is what is happening, but it's not a real good user flow. Everything jumping, loadings everywhere. But well, we can make boxes with grades like there is a name that I don't remember, but it's not really perfect. And why, if we can make like this? We are showing a loading here, that the button is disabled. We are showing the correct value here when I do next, but this, if you see, is the previous value. So we are showing the previous value with a different styling, and this doesn't make sense to React, or if it makes sense, we will need to make a lot of things to make this, because we are showing information that is from the past tree in the current tree. And this is useDeferredValue. This is really quick to do, and you will see here, not here, here, the explanation. So it's the same thing. You are using set transition, doesn't matter, everything is working. The difference is real here. So what we are doing here is we will use the deferred value of the resource a maximum of 1 second. If the resource take more time than 1 second to come, we will use the loading. We don't want to use it's because we don't want to make the user to think that that is the value, is only a transitional thing, right? So we are using this. In the maximum of 1 second, this resource value, if any resource value is using after this and it's and throw a promise, we'll use the previous one. So if you see here, what we are doing is using here the resource and using here the deferral resource, and that is the reason. And then we have stale. So if the resource is not equal to the new resource, is because I'm waiting for the new resource, right? And this is the reason why we can see make this. So with the transition, we can show this loading, because the loading is giving us the is pending. So the loading for this will not appear because we are making on a transition level, right? But then this will take more time, so we will use the previous flow. For sure, this is weird because we always thought that React to be real stable on these things, but this was created to us to create good UIs. This used well, you can continue to be really expectable, right? Is a previous value, maximum of 1 second, and will help us for sure to making good UIs. Oh, sorry, I'm not showing the code. Oh, okay, sorry. I will need to. Sorry. That can happen. making things at the same time. Concurrent is not parallelization. This is a problem. So okay, I'm gonna show. I think this is what you didn't see. So const different is this. This is the secret. So it's a hook that we have here that is using deferred value, and we are using it here inside of the profile. So the profile is used the live one, always the live one, and the profile timeline will use the previous one. So what is going to happen is when this is a promise, we will show the last one. If this is not throwing a promise, you'll use the correct one. And so this is more or less the idea of using. And now I'm going to show my code. I think I don't have nothing to show here. Yeah, is this tail that I was talking about. So if this tail is because the resources are not the same, is because I'm showing a different resource of the current one, but this is what is making it to build this, showing like the previous value here. This open a lot of ways of us building, but I think, remember what I told in the first place about Abramov saying that the idea was React sending what is done, and what is not done he will send in the stream later when it's done. This is the way we will tell React that something is not done. Because until now we didn't tell React anything. What we told is we have different status with different information. Now we can tell React that something is not ready, please wait, and then when it's ready, continue. And this is the concurrent API. What we cover, everything. Hope you enjoyed. I think I'm gonna jump to some questions. Sorry. This is not easy to make at the same time. Let me check here if I have any questions. I don't know if I have questions or not. I'm trying to open the link. Oh. Yes, of course. So I didn't share it because this was made in the rush. So maybe I want to change some things to be easy to understand or to be better. Maybe I want to make an example, and I have one of about a data layer, because one of the problems you cannot make, because of the hooks needs to be declarative and pure, you cannot send a promise inside of anything. Like if you send a promise inside of use state when throwing goes out, I think the examples that you saw, I have an example that show you how to get data and then render. But the examples that you see, I think on the React, I don't remember if this is completely true, but the examples that you see on the documentation, everything is outside. So you download the file or the asset, right? You make the fetch, whatever the fetch it is, and we show data. But sometimes we don't have the powerful to know what is the fetch that we want to do. Maybe it's a user response. Maybe it's something different. I don't know. And I have an example here. I will for sure making everything, the presentation. So the talk is the presentation. So if you see the code, then I will show you. The code is the presentation. So I will try to put in the next week everything on the GitHub, and I will share the link with everyone. Any more questions, Pedro? Sorry to ask you, but okay. Okay, I think is everything for my side. If you have any question, please reach me in some way. My email of Mindera, contact Mindera, something. If you want to talk with me about Mindera, please, anything, you can talk with me. So hope you are enjoyed, and see you next time.